the clement and merciful. Thank you very much, General Jaffrey, the staff of CGSS, and all the distinguished guests that I see, many of my friends. I see Ambassador Coker, General Durrani, Ambassador Saleem. Welcome all of you, and thank you very much for having me here this morning. And of course, Mr. Elias Davidson, whom I just told that I had ordered all of his books for the NDU library. So anybody who doesn't find a copy of that book is welcome to approach us. Now, we heard in General Jaffrey's exposition of the false flag operations inside India, which is a horrendous crime against humanity, killing so many people, your own citizens, members of so many different communities, and blaming it on others. How long can this go on? And as we have seen through the most recent Pulwama attack, that even many institutions in the West that are ostensibly the allies of the state of India are actually not hesitating in blowing its cover. So this brings us, of course, we're Pakistanis, to analyze what's going on, but also this is a search, this is a soul-searching moment for Indians themselves, and not all Indians, but mostly the Hindu community. 78% of the Hindu community, which comprises total population of India, about a quarter of them is hardcore Hindutva, perhaps, and only about 2% out of that is the Brahmin community, which defines itself now as a racial continuity with its past, something which the Indian religion does not ordain. And I will go into that. My purpose this morning is to uncover some of the psychological elements that have somehow crept into the Indian society that are threatening not only India, that are threatening South Asia, that are threatening the entire globe, because these are nuclear weapons countries, and we have to be very, very careful. So it has become a global headache to actually analyze what's inside the Indian mind. And what I present to you is sort of a psychological, social, political analysis of why the Indians have become the way they have become. So, understanding the roots of modern Hindu fascism. In 1946, Mahatma Gandhi said, "We will not allow the sacred cow of India to be divided into two." In 1949, Jawaharlal Nehru said, "One day Pakistan will have to rejoin India." In 1948, Sardar Patel said, "Sooner or later Pakistan will have to be reintegrated with India." In 1957, Thakur Prasad Jan Sangh said, "We should not rest till Pakistan is destroyed and merged with Bharat." Now keep in mind that these people are not really the followers of V.D. Savarkar, the founder of RSS in India, which is behind all of this, where all the roots of Hindu fascism go into that thinking. These people are, especially Gandhi, is actually within the internal debate of Hinduism, remains quite opposed to the RSS mentality, and as a matter of fact was killed by the RSS people. We all know that. So how did India become the way they have become from how they used to be? After all, it's the oldest religion in the world. It's 6,000 years old. And do the Indians or the Arya, not all of the Indians are Aryans, but do the Aryans really belong to the subcontinent is another issue that I will touch upon. After all, they do claim that India is an Aryan society, Arya Samaj, remember, and hence all the Muslims who are Semites need to go away. And the Dalits and so forth, others who are also not Aryans, need to be either suppressed or reduced into a slave labor kind of thing. So, first of all, the Aryans are actually coming from Central Asia, not from India. The local populations of India were the Negrito tribes, which the British labeled as the Negrito tribes of India, are actually Dravidians, Dravid. There is a fort called Dravid Fort in south of Indus in Pakistan. And the Aryans look like, Professor Davidson, or many of you people sitting here. Dravidians look like the Sri Lankan cricket team. So it's quite certain, if you do an honest historical analysis, the land actually belonged to the Dravidians, as far as when we go into deep antiquity. Hinduism comes about 6,000 years ago. The Vedas come out of the mist of time. Nobody really knows how they came here. But we do know that the Aryans brought them here. And when they brought them here, this was an alien land. And the religion and the culture and the peoples that existed heretofore prior to the arrival of the Aryans were either marginalized, decimated, or reduced into something much, much smaller than what they actually were. So, if this be true, then can we say that the modern Hindu actually has a legitimate claim to the land of India, which is considered by them as a sacred land? So this is the land on which two great civilizations meet, the oldest religion, Hinduism, and the youngest religion out of the world, Islam. And Muslims also came from the same root that the Hindus came 4,000 years ago, and they also came from Central Asia. The earliest Muslim community actually was not from Central Asia, were the Arabs, sailors who formed a small nascent community around Malabar. And then the later Central Asians, of course, have been around for 1,000 years. So 1,000 years is a lot of time. You ask me, if I'm living in India, that how can I go back to Central Asia again, even though my forefathers might have come from there? So this whole claim, according to even the precepts of modern as well as traditional Hinduism, are bogus. And so now we move on to the problem of how India became what it became, that they Hindus themselves are castigating their fellow Hindus for this whole notion of caste. So when the Vedas came, the whole idea of what Hinduism was based on was the idea of discernment. Muslims are familiar with it. Our holy book, the Quran, has many titles. Ejaz Akram, Quran al-Kareem. We have Kitab al-Insaf, so many different titles. We also have Kitab al-Furqan. What is Kitab al-Furqan? Furqan is discernment, knowing which is good from that which is not good. So the basis for the Hindu religion was also discernment, knowing what is good from that which is not so good. So that led to an occupational structure that some most important functions would be produced by those who know it most, and the others would be performed by those who know in the hierarchy of what is good, somewhat less good, not necessarily bad. And caste has nothing to do with blood. It has nothing to do with your genetics. It has nothing to do with your family genealogy. Caste, according to Hinduism, is nothing but the temperament of your soul. If you are a Brahmin and you're practicing brahmacharya, your son, who does not want to take the brahmacharya but is much more interested in making money, he is Vaishya. He cannot be a Brahmin, even though genetically he's your son. And similarly, we find in deep antiquity examples where the people in Indian society have been born as Shudras and have actually died as not only Brahmins but as avatars, as saints. So there was this fluidity in the caste system in Hindu society, which somehow around 2,600 years ago went into crisis. The caste became a perverted notion of itself, and what Jasper calls the exile age, that somehow divinity found it necessary to send another exemplar of perfection, who was sent to India in form of Lord Buddha. Siddhartha Gautama challenged all of the notions, precepts, born into a Hindu society, challenged all of the precepts of the Hindu society, and said all of your caste system, all of your pratna and puja and everything has no meaning. This is very similar to what the arrival of Christ amongst those Jews for whom the Talmudic law had become an exercise and devoid of any deep significance, spiritual significance and meaning, and so God made it necessary to send a similar, another restatement of the same message in form of Christ. So Buddha is a symptomatic of the first crisis of the central doctrines of Hinduism. And Islam, of course, is 1,000 years ago also, when Buddhism had no future in India because they were driven out. And so all of Buddhism went into East Asia through Pakistan. Texla, which is not far from here, Taxasila, old city from where monk Maranatha took Buddhism all the way to East Asia, the only place where, and the same route was taken by Islam years later and the only place where Islam didn't go in East Asia was Japan, but the same route, Silk Route, was taken by Maranatha. So why it did not spread into India is another heuristic question, that why Buddhism was born in India, in the foothills of Nepal, but how come it did not spread inside of India? So this is a big debate amongst the Buddhists and Hindus at why did that happen, but the perversion of the caste system was one of the major reasons, which actually did not come with arrival of Muslims or the arrival of British. It actually is a long time back. When the Hindu religion became 3,000 years old and already showed signs of decay and everything, by that time, Hindu religion was already very old compared to, let's say, the pyramids of Saqqara in Giza. So now, if this is the essence of Hinduism and idea of caste, as we say, well, Gandhi has said that caste exists everywhere in the world. Only the Hindus have made a science out of that. True. Even today in Pakistan, you would see at the back of people's cars, you find Jat, Gujjar, this and that, and so forth. People take pride in their origins, and so which is their right to do that. We don't criticize that. But caste inside of India operates very differently. We often say that a person who was born as a peasant inside of France in the Middle Ages could not become nobility or royalty, but the same person could join the convent or become a friar or a brother in a church and one day become a bishop and then rise to become a pope and could legitimize or delegitimize the emperors. So the temperament, of course, is something that is the Hindu contribution to the world of knowledge, is that there are 4 stations of wisdom. But these stations must have fluidity and have nothing to do with genetics and birth, which is what has become what I call the perversion of the caste system, and this is what is hurting India the most. Now, so Hinduism has given a lot of comfort to so many souls for 6,000 years. A religion that is false could not do that. Falsity doesn't have its feet; it crumbles very quickly. But so there must be, some kind of authentic spirituality inside of Hinduism, which has made it sustain for so long. But it has now run into crisis, and we must discover in the very limited time that I have what it is. Before I explain that what has led to this transition from an excellent spiritual path to a downright perversion, which has become a global headache and a threat to the world, I would like you to see a small video clip, which is no more than 50 seconds long, perhaps a minute. And don't focus on the message, just look at the style. Look at how these people talk, the way they talk. Perhaps can my friends over there play this clip?
चाहे वो हिंदुस्तान की हो या पाकिस्तान, दम नहीं होता तो तेरी जैसी औलाद में जो अपने माँ के दूध के साथ साथ अपने बाप के खून को भी पानी कर दे.
This was a clip from the Bollywood, and irrespective of the message, General Bakshi. Pakistani generals don't talk like that. All right. Now, technically, the last guy is a Pakistani. What do we see in this type of discourse? I see anger. I see frustration. I see some type of indecency also. You don't talk like that. This is not a very honorable way of speaking to public. These are leaders. I mean, the first clip, of course, is Bollywood, which actually, you go back to Bollywood's films maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago, see Mughal-e-Azam, see other films and so forth, it's still decent. But in the movies that have been sort of since 1970s, 80s onwards, there's been lack of pause and an extreme amount of aggression and anger that we see, and this reflects the state of mind of the society. And they have a great market. So the state of mind actually is produced in the movies, and it is imbibed by the society. So symbiotically, they both reinforce each other. And to an extent that there's a certain psychological condition at a mass level that has come about, which is now reflected in today's hysterical Indian media. And this has not just happened suddenly, this is not accidental, it has a very long link. Now, fascism is defined in a typical dictionary or encyclopedia definition. That is a form of a radical, right-wing, authoritarian, and ultranationalism movement characterized by dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opposition, and strong regimentation of society and of the economy, which came about earlier in 20th century Europe. Now, 4 elements: radicalism, right-wing, authoritarian, ultranationalism, are certainly present in the modern Hindutva movement. Authoritarian, even I will say India is the largest democracy in the world. Well, I'm not really sure what it means when you say that, but if you read John Pilger's famous article, the Understanding the Roots of Democratic Fascism, then you understand that this type of fascist thinking was there under the authoritarian regimes, and it's equally there under the democratic regimes. So it should help us re-envisage what exactly is this democracy that is being practiced in India. Pankaj Mishra uses a small framework by Umberto Eco in trying to explain the psychology of vengeance that has come about in India. That there are certain elements in it. There's a traditional cult. This Hinduism is certainly not traditional. All traditional religions became eclipsed around the turn of the century. Zionism was a parody of traditional Judaism that came about first in late 1800s. In early 1900s, the Christian right movement in North America and New Hampshire came about. In 1920s, the Hindu right-wing movement in Arya Samaj and its various offshoots came about. Islamic fundamentalism comes very, very late in history. And if you compare it with all the other fundamentalisms, it's almost cute and very fuzzy looking, because the Muslims, no matter how fundamentalist they become, you can actually still invoke Sharia on them, and even they be very wrong and they're still practicing the Sharia, you can shut them up. And so hence there's the case of Khawarij, which is not subject matter of, but I would happy to give another very long lecture on that also, how this came about in the world of Islam. But the world of extremes itself, the whole ideological enterprise, the modern world is a world of extremes, in which we see that all of the world fundamentalists now, from the bosom of which this fascism is being born, are each other's friends. The Israelis, their largest constituency is not the Jews in North America and Europe, but it's actually the Christian right in America. The biggest support for the state of Israel comes from the Christian right, not from the Jews in America. Same thing in India. The Hindutva movement, which is coming all the way from Arya Samaj and RSS, Shuddhi and Sangathan and all of the other offshoots that it created, is actually best friends with the Zionists. And so, and as far as the Muslim fundamentalists is concerned, either real or the ones that are fakely created, like ISIS and Daesh and Al-Nusra and so forth, which is creation of the Zionist gangs, and the TTP, which is best friends with India and so forth, are operating hand in glove. So you see that the world extremists actually are buddies, they're good friends. And so the minorities in India today are living a very, very destitute life, and rape in modern India, Modi's India, has become a political weapon. And so the second, I move to the very last part of my, yes, thank you, Vinesh, I will finish up now, that Indian democracy is a threat to the world. Every time Indians go close to the elections, we in Pakistan start becoming nervous, because we know that it may accrue loss of life on our side of the border. And so the contemporary Hindu-Zionist alliance is also operating behind the scenes and whose ultimate boogeyman is Pakistan. Despite all of our problems that may exist, and we acknowledge, we actually do not do what they do. Because if we did it, we'd be in a whole lot of trouble. But we could actually do it. In the past, we have responded to such things, but we have not ex nihilo done much of that. And this time around, if the push comes to shove, actually might force the Pakistani hands to actually start doing proactively what they have been done for a long, long time, and they would be very sorry if you did that. And so I will wrap this up by a small quotation by Iqbal, who said that almost 100 years ago. He said that it is extremely interesting to watch the birth and growth of a new ideal among the people. Oh, the enthusiasm it inspires and the force with which it attracts all of the energies of the people to one common center. The modern Hindu is quite a phenomenon. To me, his behavior is more of a psychological than a political study. It seems that the ideal of political freedom, which is absolutely new experience to him, has seized his entire soul, turning the various streams of his energy from the wanted channels and bringing them to pour forth their whole force into this channel of activity. When he has passed through this experience, he will realize his loss. He will be transformed into an absolutely new people, new in the sense that he will no longer find himself dominated by the ethical ideals of his ancestors, whose sublime fancies have been a source of perpetual consolation to so many distressed minds. Nations are mother of ideals, but ideals in course of time become pregnant and give birth to new nations. And this ultra-nationalism that we see in form of RSS and Modi's India, very remedial saying by Einstein, who said that this type of ultra-nationalism is an infantile thing. It is the measles of mankind. And he also said that if India acknowledges its problems, and we say that, if India acknowledges its problems, then it must realize that the solutions to its problems must come from a different level of consciousness than the one it espouses now, which means that the Indians must reconsider jettisoning all of the reform movements and trying to go back to the precepts and the spiritual principles of traditional Hinduism, and they might be better off. With a prayer to may God help India. Alhamdulillah wa nasta'in.